On 22 March, a farmer was going about his field, when he came across a blue plastic bag in a lay-by on the A507 in Cottard, Hertfordshire. As he opened the bag, he came across more plastic wraps around a thing he described to as mushy whe. He tried popping it. The farmer was creeped out by this, so he called the police. As police opened this bag, they found a complete left human leg with the foot still attached. A murder investigation was immediately launched. But on 29 March, a group of passerbys came across a left forearm, dismembered at the elbow and wrist. The forearm was found on a grass verge along Drovers Lane, Wheat Hampstead. But this was not it. On March 31, a head was unearthed by a farmer in a cattle pen in a field in Asford, Leicestershire. The flesh had been removed and the eyes, ears, tongue, and neck had been cut off. On April 7, a right leg was found in a holdall near the A10 Puckridge bypass in Hertfordshire by a driver who had stopped by to take some rest. 4 days later, on April 11, a torso, right arm and upper left arm were discovered in a ditch by a walker near Standon, Hertfordshire inside a green suitcase, the same brand as the holdall. As the body parts were found all across the UK, the media named this body as the Jigsaw Man. On forensic testing, police could only tell that this was a Caucasian man, who was obese, suffered from eczema, had bleached skin pigmentation on his legs, a fungal infection on his toenails and was missing 2 front teeth. They could not identify this man as he had no previous criminal record, meaning he didn't have his DNA or dental records entered in the police record. But it didn't take police long to identify this man
has ever seen. Roger Kingsley's a farmer who's lived in the area all his life. He works on his family's farm. On the 22nd of March 2009, he was going about his daily routine. But with over 500 acres to cover, it's often several days between visits to any particular field.
It was about 7:30 in the morning when I started cultivating the field with the tractor. I noticed a bag at the bottom of the field. It stuck out, so it was quite noticeable. And I thought, well, I'll pick that up at some point in the day, as it'll only get caught up when we're hedge cutting or trimming the banks and one thing or another. And I didn't think anything more of it until later on in the afternoon, when I actually got a bit closer to it. And I stopped the tractor, jumped off with the dogs to have a look. I found the object just the other side of this fence here. It, to me, had looked as though it had been placed, not thrown. It was in a green holdall, and then when I unzipped it, the object was wrapped in blue builder's plastic. And it was at that point I just touched it with my finger, and it actually squidged in, for want of a better word. And that's when I got a bit suspicious in the fact that it could be something that a bit untoward.
Roger called the local police, who sent a team of officers to meet him at the field.
When the police came out, I was here on the site to show them where the bag actually was. The police officers approached it, looked at it. One of them bent down, undone the bag and saw the blue plastic inside, and then he had a bit of a feel around inside and looked up to his colleague and said, "I think it's got toes on." Well, I'm pretty sure that's what he said, and I'll never forget that. And they realised then that it was something very suspicious. Once they realised what was in the bag, they shut the road off, shut the village off more or less, for that night and the next morning.
Roger had found what turned out to be a human left leg, just close to a lay-by on the A507. But there was nothing else suspicious at the scene. The case was being handled by officers from the Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit, based here at police headquarters in Welwyn Garden City. But at first, they didn't know what they were dealing with.
What was unusual about it was the skill in which the leg had been removed from the body. We had a specialist Home Office pathologist and an anthropologist to actually give us an informed view as to whether it was a medical amputation or not. But because there was no cauterisation of blood veins and arteries, then there was no indication that it was a medical amputation. So we could rule that out. If we could rule that out, then quite clearly it was a murder inquiry.
Operation Abnet was launched, but the key to finding the perpetrator would be identifying the victim.
The vast majority of people who commit murder somebody that they know. That's a brutal fact of life, unfortunately. So if we could build up a really clear picture and identify who our victim was, that surely would give us a number of lines of inquiry to identify who the offenders were. But because the victim's details weren't on the DNA database, because they'd had no history of involvement with the police in any way, shape or form, it didn't help us in actually identifying who that one victim was.
The police were making slow progress, but over the next few weeks, members of the public would make further discoveries that helped unravel the mystery, which was baffling both the investigating team and forensic experts, especially when a human head was discovered.
It is a head with a face that has been removed. There are no eyes, there is no nose, there is no mouth, there is no tongue, there are no ears. It is an anatomical dissection, a fresh anatomical dissection.
After the discovery of a human left leg in a lay-by in Cottered, Hertfordshire in March 2009, a murder investigation, Operation Abnet, was launched. With just one gruesome discovery made by a member of the public, police were baffled.
It begged belief to start with, to think what is there behind this murder, what is the motive for this murder?
And a week later, on March the 29th, there was a second discovery. A passerby found a left forearm discarded on a quiet country road in Wheathampstead. Almost 25 miles from the Cottered site, the key question was, were the two body parts related?
It's extremely rare for body parts to be distributed and then to be found in the way that it has in this case. Of course, a concern to me was, are we talking about one victim or are we talking about a number of victims? And it was only after the discovery of the body parts that we could then carry out forensic testing to compare DNA between the body parts to confirm that we were in fact talking about one victim.
The police began looking into missing persons records, but without being able to identify the age, ethnicity or even gender from the body parts, it was proving difficult. With no identity, there was no obvious motive, and the absence of even a murder scene left police with very little to go on. But while inquiries were taking place here in Hertfordshire, the case was about to open up on a much wider scale with a new discovery almost 100 miles north in Leicestershire.
By a farmer who was digging in his field and we believe the offenders had got out of the vehicle and discarded it in woodland that was next to the field, and we believe that it was probably carried into the field, into the open, by animals.
The police had now got 3 body parts, all confirmed as the same victim through DNA testing, but they were still no closer to identifying a victim. And the state of the head, which had been found, didn't help them. Much of the skin and soft tissue had been removed, and police weren't even sure whether it belonged to a man or a woman. They called in the help of Sue Black and the forensic anthropology team at the University of Dundee's Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification.
They sent a photograph of the head to us because they had another missing person, not in the vicinity, but geographically fairly close. And what they wanted to know is, could this be this individual? We're looking for a young adult female. Could this head belong to a young adult female? So we received the photographs, we looked at it and we went, no, this is not your young adult female. This is somebody else. This looks to us like a middle-aged male.
The image is too horrific to broadcast.
You could never have shown that image. And it's certainly not an image that I would ever show, because it is not a pleasant image. It is a head with a face that has been removed. There are no eyes, there is no nose, there is no mouth, there is no tongue, there are no ears. It is an anatomical dissection, a fresh anatomical dissection. That is not pleasant for anybody to have to deal with.
But that unpleasant task fell to Sue and her colleague Lucina Hackman.
Our first thought when we looked at the head was that there was no soft tissue and there was no evidence of decomposition, so we had to look at another method of loss of soft tissue in this situation. So we asked ourselves if it may have been animals that had found the head and removed the soft tissue, but there were quite obviously no bite marks or any marks left by any animal activity.
If this isn't animal activity, then it must be human intervention. If this is human intervention, then we predict we will find cut marks here, here and here.
The soft tissue had been removed from the head using a sharp implement, and it had been very skillfully cut where the muscles attached to the bone.
That was a confirmation to us that we were really looking at a detailed, not just dismemberment, but a disfigurement in relation to the head.
Interestingly, in this situation, the teeth were all left intact, which surprised us because the teeth are very commonly used as a method of identification.
This is the CT scan of the skull, but even with the teeth intact, without any clue as to who the victim was, there were no dental records to compare them with, and the search for an identity continued. The police and forensics experts were working with what had been recovered so far. To date, only a left leg, left forearm and head had been unearthed. But a week later, 2 further body parts were found in quick succession. On the 7th of April, a right leg was discovered in Puckeridge in Hertfordshire, and just a few days later, a suitcase containing a torso was recovered 3 miles south. The new discoveries had the same DNA as the rest, and the torso provided police with some key evidence.
We can now confirm the cause of death, which was a stab wound to the back. The man is to be believed to be of white, Asian or of mixed heritage, between the heights of 5'6" and 5'10".
Jeffrey Howe was reported missing by his mother a few weeks ago, and he matched the victim profile. So the police got Jeffrey's dental records, and that was when the body parts were identified to be that of Jeffrey. Howe was publicly named as the victim on April 23. Jeffrey Howe was a 49-year-old kitchen salesman who was described by his brother to be a very king and gold-hearted person who always liked helping people around. As soon as Jeffrey was identified, police immediately went to his apartment complex and found a man and woman living there. These were 38-year-old Stephen Marshall and his 21-year-old prostitute girlfriend Sarah Bush. They told police that Jeffrey had gone out of country on a vacation, but police knew that it was a lie because they found Jeffrey's passport lying on top of a desk in his living room. So Stephen and Sarah were immediately arrested on the grounds of suspicion. When the house was forensic ally searched, police found a large blood stain beneath the floor carpet in Jeffrey's room and various other blood spots in the bathroom and Jeffrey's car. So they concluded that Jeffrey was murdered in his bed and dismembered in the bathroom. To confirm that they had the right man, they compared the green fibres found on the duct tape wrapped around one of the plastic bags to a green t-shirt of Stephen, and it came out to be a perfect match. So Stephen and Sarah were arrested and charged for the murder of Jeffrey Howe. The dismemberment was done so professionally that police believed that this was not the first dismemberment that Stephen had conducted. Pathologists revealed that Howe was murdered on the night of 8 or March 9, 2009. He was stabbed twice in the back with a 4-inch blade, one of the wounds puncturing his lung. Howe may have been alive for up to an hour after he was stabbed. Now a bit of a background story on Stephen Marshall. Stephen Marshall, 38, was a bodybuilder, personal trainer, and former bouncer of Eyot Path, Borehamwood Wood, Hertfordshire, and formerly of Park Street, St Albans, where he once owned a gym. He was a work associate and lodger of Howe's at his flat in Southgate, London. Marshall had lived at the Southgate flat since November 2008 after Howe, said to be his drinking buddy, wanted to help him out. He stayed without paying rent along with his girlfriend Sarah Bush, 21, from Southgate, who was a sex worker. Sarah Bush met Marshall when he hired her as a prostitute. She spent most of her childhood in care, and has 2 children. Her first baby, which she had when she had just turned 15, died aged 10 days. They stole Howe's food and refused to leave after promising to do so, which he complained about to a friend at Christmas time. They fraudulently claimed housing benefit by forging his signature, saying he was leasing the property to them. After the murder, Marshall and Bush used Howe's bank account to buy a laptop, shoes, takeaways, and other consumer goods and food. They set up an account with online retailer Littlewoods, some of the purchases being made on a computer in St Albans Library. They wrote forged checks to clear his account. They sold some of his belongings, including his mobile phone, furniture, and his Saab car, which was sold on eBay. They said to Howe's friend Shariah Khan that he had packed up and left. Howe's adopted brother John visited the flat on March 28 and was told by Bush that Howe had not collected rent for a while and had left with his belongings. Police arrested the couple at the flat in Southgate, North London on April 21. The arresting officer said that Marshall was very, very nervous, jittery, his leg was shaking, and Sarah Bush was uncomfortable. On police interrogation, Marshall gave no comment to police questioning. The journey of Marshall and Bush to Leicestershire in order to dispose of the body parts was traced from CCTV and automatic number plate recognition. The trial began on January 12, 2010 and was held at St Albans Crown Court, with Stuart Trimmer QC prosecuting. Marshall initially denied murdering Howe, claiming that Bush murdered him and that he only helped to dismember and dispose of the body, admitting counts of perverting the course of justice and intending to prevent a coroner from holding an inquest. Bush denied all charges. The court heard that Marshall previously threatened to get rid of Bush's previous partner in Epping Forest, and to dispose of another woman. He had boasted to her of having considerable experience of disposing of bodies. She said the first time he did so he was nauseated and took cocaine to cope, becoming an addict. A witness said that when working for the Adams crime family, Marshall had used a meat cleaver, meat knives, a hacksaw, or a chainsaw to cut up bodies. A friend of Bush, Sophie Franklin citation needed, told the court that when drunk, Bush confessed to friends that she helped Marshall kill Howe after Marshall stabbed him in the back, placing a pillow over Howe's face to stop the noise. Another friend of Bush, Danielle Matthews, said Bush told her she had seen the murder and that Howe had laughed when Marshall had earlier threatened to kill him unless he left the flat. On January 29, 3 weeks into the trial, Marshall changed his plea to guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on February 1, for a minimum of 36 years. The judge, Jeremy Cook, ruled that little credit could be given for the change of plea given the overwhelming evidence. He dismissed Marshall's claim that he was on the verge of drug-induced suicide when he stabbed his victim in bed. Marshall is ineligible for parole until 2046. Bush also changed her plea to guilty on February 1, and was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months for perverting the course of justice by helping Marshall take Househead to Leicestershire, and was given a concurrent sentence of 2 years and 3 months for giving false information about House whereabouts, although she was acquitted of murder. She served 45 months in prison. Via his lawyer, Peter Doyle, Marshall admitted in court on February 1 to dismembering 4 more bodies between 1995 and 1998 and disposing of them in Epping Forest, when he worked for the Adams crime family as a doorman for a London nightclub. This admission was to the surprise of police, but Marshall refused to give them details of the other victims. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like and subscribe.